The chickens started their morning chatter before dawn broke across the Montana territory, and Isaac Thompson was already awake to hear it, his massive frame moving quietly through the cabin he had built with his own calloused hands 3 years prior, when he decided civilization had grown too crowded for his liking. He stepped outside into the crisp September air of 1877, his shoulder-length dark hair still damp from washing in the basin, his muscled arms stretching as he surveyed the land that had become his sanctuary. The henhouse sat 50 yards from the main cabin, a sturdy structure he had fashioned from lodgepole pine, and as he approached with a bucket of feed, he heard something that made him stop dead in his tracks. A woman's voice drifted through the morning mist, soft and melodic, speaking to his chickens as though they were gathered for afternoon tea in some fancy parlor back east. Isaac moved closer, his boots silent on the dewy grass, and peered through a gap in the wooden slats. Inside his henhouse sat a young woman with auburn hair falling loose around her shoulders, her dress torn and muddy, speaking earnestly to Henrietta, his most temperamental Rhode Island red. "I know exactly what you mean," the woman was saying, nodding seriously as the chicken clucked and scratched at the ground. "Men can be terribly stubborn about such things. My father was the same way, always insisting he knew best about everything from planting corn to choosing suitors." She sighed deeply, and Isaac found himself leaning closer to hear. "Not that it matters anymore. I suppose I have made quite a mess of things, haven't I?" Henrietta clucked sympathetically, and the woman reached out to stroke the hen's rust-colored feathers. "You are very kind to listen. I walked all night after the wagon broke down, and when those men started following me, well, I just ran. I saw your light and hoped perhaps the owner might be someone decent, but then I heard roosters crowing and thought perhaps I could rest here until morning. Chickens are far better company than most people I have known, present company included, dear Henrietta." Isaac cleared his throat, and the woman spun around so quickly, she startled poor Henrietta into flight, feathers exploding in all directions. The woman's eyes were the color of wild violets, wide with fear as she pressed herself against the back wall of the henhouse. Isaac had to duck considerably to fit through the door, his broad shoulders barely clearing the frame he had built for his own large body. "I apologize for trespassing," the woman said quickly, her chin lifting with dignity despite the obvious terror in her eyes. "I meant no harm to your birds. I was simply seeking shelter for the night." Isaac studied her in the growing light. She was young, probably no more than 22 or 23, with a heart-shaped face smudged with dirt and eyes that held both intelligence and exhaustion. Her dress had once been fine calico, now ruined by brambles and mud. She held herself like someone accustomed to better circumstances, but there was no pretension in the way she had been speaking to Henrietta. "You said men were following you," Isaac said, his voice rough from disuse. He spoke to his chickens and his horse more than humans these days, and his vocal cords seemed to have forgotten the proper way to address another person. "How many? How far back?" The question seemed to surprise her. She had clearly expected him to demand explanations or perhaps throw her off his property. "3 men, I think. Maybe 4. They were part of the wagon train I was traveling with from Kansas. When our wagon broke an axle yesterday afternoon, the wagon master said we would have to stay behind until repairs could be made. My uncle, who was driving, she paused, her voice catching. He took ill suddenly. Very suddenly, he died before sunset." Isaac's jaw tightened. What did he eat or drink? Only water from his canteen. The same canteen one of those men, Silas, had offered to fill for him that morning. Her violet eyes met his, and he saw she understood exactly what had happened. "Silas had been pressing me to accept his attentions since we left Kansas. He said with my uncle dead, I would need a husband to look after me. He said it very kindly, but his eyes were not kind at all. 'So you ran,' Isaac said. It was not a question. 'So I ran,' she confirmed. 'I took what I could carry and started walking north. I thought perhaps I could reach Virginia City and find work, but I am not entirely certain which direction that is from here. I seem to have gotten myself thoroughly lost.'" Isaac made a decision in that moment, watching how gently she picked up Henrietta and smoothed down the hen's ruffled feathers, apologizing softly for startling her. Any woman who spoke to chickens with such genuine warmth, who understood their individual personalities enough to confide in them like old friends, belonged in a place exactly like this. He did not believe in fate or divine providence, but he believed in reading sign, and everything about this woman told him she was meant to be here. "Virginia City is 3 days north on horseback," he said. "You would never make it on foot, especially not with men tracking you. You will stay here." "I cannot impose," she began, but Isaac cut her off with a gesture of one massive hand. "Not asking. Telling. Those men come here, they will find trouble they are not prepared for." He turned toward the door, then paused. "Name is Isaac Thompson. You can call me Isaac Violet Harper, she said softly. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, Isaac. I truly have nowhere else to go. Got that impression when I found you holding counsel with my chickens before dawn, he said, and was rewarded with a small smile that transformed her exhausted face into something luminous. Come on up to the cabin. You look like you could use food and sleep in that order. Violet followed him across the misty ground, her eyes taking in the well-maintained property with obvious surprise. The cabin was larger than most mountain dwellings, with a covered porch and shutters that actually hung straight. A vegetable garden sprawled to one side, neat rows showing careful tending. A smokehouse, a root cellar, and a small barn completed the homestead. Beyond it all, the Rocky Mountains rose in magnificent peaks against the lightening sky. You have built something remarkable here, Violet said as they climbed the porch steps. How long have you lived in Montana Territory? 3 years come October, Isaac replied, holding the door open for her. Came up from Colorado after I decided I preferred trees to people. No offense taken. I am beginning to share that sentiment. Violet stepped inside and stopped, clearly not knowing what to expect but finding something entirely different than whatever she had imagined. The cabin interior was spacious and clean, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall, real glass windows letting in the morning light, and furniture that, while simple, was well crafted and sturdy. Books lined a shelf near the fireplace. A bearskin rug covered part of the wooden floor. You read Winter Gets Long up here, Isaac said, moving to the fireplace to stir up the banked coals. Books are good company, better than most people. Present company excluded, he added, echoing her earlier words to Henrietta. Violet laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise her as much as it surprised Isaac. When was the last time he had heard a woman laugh in his home? Never, actually. He had built this place as a fortress against the world, never imagining someone might breach its walls simply by being kind to his chickens. Isaac prepared breakfast with efficient movements, his large hands surprisingly deft as he sliced bacon and cracked eggs into a cast-iron skillet. Violet sat at the rough-hewn table watching him work while fighting to keep her eyes open. The warmth of the cabin and the smell of food cooking were lulling her toward sleep despite her best efforts. After you eat, you sleep, Isaac said, not turning from the stove. Got a spare room built for when my brother visits, though he never has. Bed is made up clean. You can rest there safely. What about those men? Violet asked, accepting the plate of food he set before her. What if they come? Then I will handle it, Isaac said simply, sitting down across from her with his own plate. Eat. They ate in comfortable silence, Violet too hungry and exhausted to maintain conversation. Isaac too accustomed to solitude to feel the need to fill the quiet with words. When Violet's head began to nod forward, nearly landing in her empty plate, Isaac stood and gestured toward a door at the back of the cabin. Sleep now, I will keep watch. Violet wanted to protest, to insist she could not put him in danger, but her body betrayed her. She stumbled toward the offered room and barely registered the clean quilt and feather pillow, before collapsing into the deepest sleep she had known in weeks, perhaps years. Her last conscious thought was that she felt safer in this stranger's cabin than she had felt anywhere since her mother died 5 years ago. Isaac cleaned up the breakfast dishes, a task that felt strangely domestic with another person sleeping under his roof. He kept his rifle close as he went about his morning chores, feeding his horse, a huge bay gelding named Bear, and checking his trap lines in the woods behind the cabin. His eyes constantly scanned the southern approach, looking for signs of riders. Around noon he saw them. 4 men on horseback picked their way up the mountain trail, following tracks that would have been obvious to a child. They rode with the casual arrogance of men who believed their numbers made them invincible. Isaac watched them from a position behind a large boulder, his rifle resting easy in his hands. He counted ammunition, noted the way they sat their horses, and assessed their threat level with the practiced eye of someone who had survived worse situations during his years as an army scout before retreating to these mountains. The riders approached his cabin with weapons drawn, which told Isaac everything he needed to know about their intentions. He fired a warning shot that kicked up dirt 3 feet in front of the lead horse, causing the animal to rear and the rider to curse. That is far enough, Isaac called out, his voice carrying easily across the clearing. You are on private property and you are not welcome. The lead rider, a lean man with a cruel mouth and calculating eyes, steadied his horse and looked around for the source of the voice. We are looking for a woman, he called out. Young thing, auburn hair, probably half crazy from being lost in these mountains all night. Her uncle died and we are her only family now. We have come to take her somewhere safe. Funny definition of safe, Isaac replied, considering you poisoned her uncle and spent the night tracking her like prey. That got a reaction. The 4 men exchanged glances, and their hands moved closer to their weapons. The lean man, who must be Silas, put on an expression of wounded innocence. I do not know what lies that girl has been telling, but her mind was not right even before her uncle passed. We are only trying to help. Now if you have seen her, the Christian thing would be to send her out so we can take her to Virginia City, where she can be properly looked after. The Christian thing, Isaac said, allowing cold amusement to color his voice, would be for you 4 to turn around and ride back the way you came. The girl does not want to go with you. That makes this simple. Leave, or I will make you leave, and I promise you will not enjoy the second option. Silas's false friendliness dropped away like a discarded mask. There are 4 of us and 1 of you, Mountain Man. Those are not good odds. For you, Isaac agreed. Not good odds for you at all. He fired again, this time sending 1 man's hat flying off his head. Before they could react, he had levered another round into the chamber and fired a 3rd shot that severed 1 man's saddle cinch, sending both saddle and rider crashing to the ground. The remaining riders wheeled their horses around, suddenly very eager to be elsewhere. You have 1 minute to be out of rifle range, Isaac called. After that, I start aiming lower than hats and cinches. They did not need a minute. The 3 mounted men grabbed their companion and pulled him up behind 1 saddle, then spurred their horses back down the mountain trail fast enough to risk breaking their animals' legs. Isaac watched them disappear into the tree line, then circled around to make sure they kept going. He tracked them for 2 miles until he was satisfied they had no intention of returning, at least not immediately. When he returned to the cabin, afternoon sun was slanting through the windows. The door to the spare room remained closed, suggesting Violet was still sleeping. Isaac settled into a chair on the porch, his rifle across his knees, and kept watch as the sun tracked west across the sky. He found his thoughts drifting to the woman sleeping inside, the way she had spoken so gently to his chickens, the intelligence in her violet eyes, the dignity she had maintained despite her circumstances. The door opened behind him as evening approached. Violet emerged, her hair somewhat tamed, her face clean, wearing the same ruined dress because she had nothing else. She looked rested but uncertain, as though unsure of her welcome now that the immediate danger had passed. They came, she said, reading the truth on his face. What happened? They left, Isaac replied, convinced them that was the best choice for all involved. Did you kill them? Her voice held no judgment, only curiosity about her own situation. No, scared them considerably, but no permanent damage beyond pride in 1 saddle. He gestured to the other chair on the porch. Sit. We should talk about what comes next. Violet lowered herself into the chair, her hands folded in her lap. I should leave. I have brought danger to your door, and you have been nothing but kind. I cannot repay that by making you a target. Already a target, if they want to make it that way, Isaac said. But they will not return. Men like that are cowards when faced with real opposition. They wanted easy prey, and you are not that anymore. He turned to look at her directly. Question is, what do you want? Virginia City is still 3 days north. I can take you there, help you find work and lodging. Or you can stay here. Stay? Violet's eyes widened. I could not possibly. You live alone, and I have no skills that would be useful in a place like this. I would be nothing but a burden. You were having a full conversation with Henrietta about proper rooster behavior at dawn, Isaac pointed out. That tells me you understand animals. This place has plenty of animals that need tending. Chickens, horse, the occasional deer that needs dressing. Garden needs harvesting and putting up for winter. Cabin needs cleaning I have been ignoring for 3 years. If you stayed, there would be work enough, and you would earn your keep. He paused, considering his next words carefully. But more than that, I listened to how you talked to those chickens. Like they mattered. Like their thoughts and feelings were worth considering. That tells me something about who you are, Violet Harper, and it tells me you belong in a place like this more than you belong in some Virginia City boarding house, taking in laundry or working in a saloon. Violet was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountains turning gold and purple in the sunset. My uncle was taking me to Oregon, she finally said. My father died 2 years ago, left debts I could not pay. Lost our farm in Kansas. Uncle Charles offered me a place with his family in Portland, but I think he was simply being kind. He had 10 children of his own and barely enough to feed them. When he died, I felt terrible relief mixed with the grief, because I knew I was heading toward a life of being the poor relation, the maiden aunt who helps raise other people's children and never has anything of her own. And what do you want? Isaac asked. If you could have anything, I want to matter, Violet said simply. I want to wake up in the morning and know that my presence makes a difference, that I am not just a burden to be endured. I want to build something lasting. I want to be somewhere I belong. She turned to meet his eyes. When I was sitting in that henhouse talking to Henrietta, for the first time in years I felt like I could breathe. Is that absurd? No, Isaac said. Not absurd at all. That is how I felt when I built this cabin, when I first walked this land and knew it was mine. Like I could finally breathe. He stood, his large frame unfolding from the chair. So stay. Stay as long as you want. I will build a proper sleeping quarters, separate from the main cabin if that makes you more comfortable. We will work out an arrangement that is fair and proper. You will have your own space, your own life, but you will not be alone unless you want to be. You would do that for a stranger? Violet asked, her voice wavering slightly. Why? Isaac considered the question, looking for words to explain something he barely understood himself. Because I spent 3 years building a place so I could be alone, and in 3 minutes of listening to you talk to my chickens, I realized I had just been hiding. You were not hiding when you ran from those men. You were choosing something better. There is a difference. Violet stood and extended her hand, a formal gesture that carried weight. Then I accept your offer, Isaac Thompson, with gratitude and the promise that I will work hard and not take advantage of your kindness. Isaac took her hand, his calloused palm dwarfing her smaller one, and felt something shift in his carefully constructed world. Welcome home, Violet Harper. The next morning began Violet's education in mountain living. Isaac woke her before dawn with a gentle knock on the door and instructions to dress warmly. She emerged to find he had already set out a pair of men's trousers and a work shirt, both far too large but serviceable when belted. Cannot work a mountain homestead in a torn dress, he explained gruffly, then turned away to give her privacy while she changed. When she appeared in the overlarge clothes, sleeves and pant legs rolled up multiple times, he felt something squeeze in his chest. She looked younger, more vulnerable, but also more real than she had in the ruined calico dress. I look ridiculous, Violet said, laughing at herself. You look practical, Isaac corrected. Come on, chickens are waiting for their breakfast, and Henrietta will give us both grief if we are late. Working alongside Isaac, Violet began to understand the rhythm of his days. Every task had its place, its proper order, creating a pattern that was both efficient and deeply satisfying. They fed the chickens together, and Isaac watched with concealed amusement as Violet greeted each bird by name, somehow having memorized all 15 of them overnight. That is Beatrice, the bared rock, she said confidently, pointing. And those two are the twins, Martha and Mary, though I cannot tell them apart yet. That grumpy one who keeps pecking at the others is Eleanor, and she clearly rules the roost despite Henrietta's protests. You learned all that in one night of conversation? Isaac asked, genuinely impressed. Animals make sense to me, Violet said, scattering feed with practiced motions. Always have. My mother used to say I preferred the company of our milk cow to most of our neighbors, and she was not wrong. Old Bessie was far better at listening than Mrs. Carmichael ever was. They moved through the morning tasks, Isaac teaching and Violet learning with a quick intelligence that surprised him. She mucked out Bear's stall without complaint, hauled water from the creek with determination despite the heavy buckets, and proved remarkably adept at splitting kindling once Isaac showed her the proper technique. By midday they were both hungry and tired, collapsing onto the porch with plates of cold venison and biscuits Isaac had baked the previous day. I have been meaning to ask, Violet said between bites. Why chickens? Most mountain men I have heard of live on hunting and trapping. You have a whole flock of laying hens and a vegetable garden that could feed a family. Isaac chewed thoughtfully before answering. Spent too many winters eating nothing but meat and hardtack when I was scouting for the army. Swore when I built my own place I would have variety. Chickens provide eggs, meat when needed, and they are useful company. Garden gives me something to tend, something that depends on me but does not judge. Turns out I like that. You were an army scout? Violet asked, curiosity evident in her voice. What made you leave? Got tired of watching men make stupid decisions that got other men killed, Isaac said bluntly. Got tired of following orders that made no sense. Got tired of pretending the things we did to the Cheyenne and Sioux were justified just because someone in Washington said they were. He met her eyes, challenging her to judge him. I walked away in '74, did not look back. Built this place instead. That must have taken courage, Violet said quietly. Walking away from the only life you knew. Staying would have taken more courage than I had left, Isaac admitted. This was the coward's way, hiding in the mountains where I did not have to watch anymore. I do not think you are a coward, Violet said firmly. A coward would have turned me away yesterday, would have let those men take me rather than risk confrontation. You chose the harder path then, just as you did when you left the army. That is not cowardice, that is integrity. Isaac felt heat rise in his face, unused to such direct praise. He stood abruptly, uncomfortable with the emotions stirring in his chest, should get back to work. That firewood will not split itself, and we need to fill the woodshed before the first snow. Could come any time now. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged that felt increasingly natural to both of them. Mornings began with animal care, Violet chattering to the chickens while Isaac tended Bear and checked his trap lines. Violet proved to have a gift for coaxing vegetables from the rocky Montana soil, harvesting the last of the squash and potatoes with triumphant satisfaction. Together they preserved food for winter, Violet learning to can and smoke meat under Isaac's patient instruction. In the evenings they sat on the porch as the air grew crisp with autumn's approach, talking about everything and nothing. Isaac found himself telling stories from his childhood in Colorado, about his younger brother who had chosen city life in Denver over mountain solitude, about his parents who had passed when he was barely 20. Violet shared memories of her mother's gentle wisdom, her father's stubborn pride that had ultimately ruined them, her dreams of seeing the Pacific Ocean someday. "Why the ocean?" Isaac asked one evening as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. "Because it is supposed to be endless," Violet replied, hugging her knees to her chest. "Because I have spent my whole life landlocked, surrounded by boundaries and limitations. The ocean represents possibility, I suppose, freedom to be more than what everyone expects." Isaac looked at her profile in the fading light, the way wind lifted strands of her auburn hair, the thoughtful expression on her face. "You have that here too," he said carefully. "Freedom to be more. No one watching, no one judging. Just space to figure out who Violet Harper is without anyone telling you who you should be." She turned to him with a smile that made his heart stutter. "I am beginning to realize that. Thank you, Isaac, for seeing me when I could not see myself." The first snow came in early October, a light dusting that transformed the landscape into something magical. Violet woke to find Isaac already outside, standing in the falling snow with his face turned up to the sky, his long hair collecting white flakes. She joined him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, and they stood together in companionable silence, watching the world turn white. "Beautiful," Violet breathed, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Going to be a hard winter," Isaac said, but there was no complaint in his voice. "Better start work on that separate cabin I promised you." "About that," Violet said, gathering courage. "I have been thinking. It seems wasteful to build an entirely new structure when this cabin is large enough for two people to live comfortably with privacy. If you partitioned off one section with a proper door and wall, I could have my own quarters without the expense and effort of a separate building." Isaac considered this, recognizing the practical wisdom while also acknowledging the danger. Living in the same structure, even with separate rooms, would put them in close proximity. And Isaac was becoming increasingly aware that proximity to Violet Harper was affecting him in ways he had not anticipated. The way she hummed while working, the sound of her laughter when Eleanor the bossy chicken chased the rooster, the concentrated expression on her face when she was reading one of his books in the evening, all of it was worming its way past his carefully constructed defenses. "Would be more practical," he admitted. "But Violet, people talk. If anyone knew you were living here with me under one roof, your reputation would be ruined." "My reputation," Violet said with a bitter laugh, "was ruined the moment I ran away from that wagon train. Besides, who is there to tell? The chickens? I trust Henrietta to keep our secrets." She laid a hand on his arm, a light touch that seared through his shirt. "I trust you, Isaac. I have trusted you from that first morning when you found me in your henhouse and gave me kindness instead of suspicion. Please trust me enough to let me make my own choices about my reputation." So Isaac built a wall, a solid partition that divided the cabin into two distinct living spaces while leaving the main room and kitchen shared territory. He installed a door that locked from Violet's side, ensuring her privacy and safety. He built her a wardrobe for the clothes they had purchased on a trip to the trading post in Bozeman, simple durable dresses and work clothes that fit her properly. Watching her delight in having possessions of her own again nearly undid him. November brought bitter cold and more snow. They worked together to ensure all the animals were secure, insulating the chicken coop with extra straw and making sure Bear had adequate shelter. Violet's cheeks grew permanently flushed from cold and wind, her hands developing calluses that matched Isaac's own. She was transforming before his eyes from a refined woman into something fiercer, more elemental, and Isaac found her increasingly difficult to resist. It came to a head one evening when Isaac returned from checking his trap lines to find Violet in his shirt, soaking wet and furious. She had apparently fallen through ice on the creek while attempting to fetch water, and only her quick reflexes had prevented her from being swept away by the current. "What in God's name were you thinking?" Isaac roared, his fear manifesting as anger. That creek is half frozen, you could have died. I was thinking we needed water for cooking. Violet shot back, her own temper flaring. I was thinking I could handle a simple task without supervision. I was thinking I am not some fragile flower who needs protecting every moment. You are also not invincible, Isaac countered, grabbing a blanket and wrapping it around her shivering form despite her protests. You are stubborn and reckless, and you drive me absolutely insane. Well, forgive me for being such a burden, Violet said, her voice breaking. I will pack my things and leave for Virginia City in the morning. Clearly, I am nothing but a problem you no longer wish to tolerate. You are not a burden, Isaac said, his voice dropping to something raw and honest. You are the best thing that has happened to me in years, and the thought of you dying in that creek just about stopped my heart. Do you understand? I cannot lose you, Violet, I cannot. They stared at each other, the truth finally spoken aloud hanging between them. Violet's violet eyes were wide, her lips parted in surprise. Isaac realized he still had his hands on her shoulders, could feel her shivering beneath the blanket. Every instinct screamed at him to pull her close, to warm her with his own body heat, to kiss her until neither of them could remember why they had been shouting. Isaac, she whispered, and the way she said his name undid every careful barrier he had constructed. He released her abruptly, stepping back with effort. Get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death. I will make hot tea. We will discuss this when you are warm and dry and we can both think clearly. Violet retreated to her room, and Isaac heard the rustle of fabric as she changed. He busied himself with building up the fire and heating water, his hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline and emotion coursing through his system. When Violet emerged in a dry dress with her hair wrapped in a towel, he handed her tea and gestured to the chair closest to the fire. They sat in tense silence for several minutes before Violet spoke. I am sorry for frightening you. You are right that I was reckless. But Isaac, I need you to understand that I cannot be kept in a cage, even a comfortable one. I need to feel capable, useful, strong. If you are going to spend all your time protecting me from every danger, I will suffocate. And if I have to spend all my time wondering if you are about to kill yourself doing something dangerous, I will go mad, Isaac replied. There has to be middle ground, Violet. You can be strong and capable while also accepting that sometimes caution is warranted. I know, she admitted quietly. I think perhaps I was trying too hard to prove something, to you, to myself, that I belong here, that I can handle this life. You do belong here, Isaac said firmly. That was never in question. From the moment I heard you talking to Henrietta like she was your dearest friend, I knew you belonged. That has not changed because you fell in the creek or because we both have stubborn streaks a mile wide. Violet laughed, a watery sound that held relief. We are quite a pair, are we not? The mountain man who hides from the world and the woman who ran away from her entire life, both convinced we are better off alone. Are we better off alone? Isaac asked, voicing the question that had been haunting him for weeks. Because I am not sure I believe that anymore. I was doing fine here by myself, but now that you are here, I cannot imagine going back to that solitude. The cabin feels empty when you are in town. The mornings feel wrong without hearing you greet the chickens. Even my thoughts are not my own anymore because half of them are wondering what you are thinking or whether that book I am reading might make you laugh. Violet set down her tea with trembling hands. You think about me? Constantly, Isaac admitted, the word feeling like liberation. I think about the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating, the way you sing under your breath when you think I cannot hear, the way you look at the mountains like they are a promise being kept. I think about you all the time, Violet, and it terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? She asked, leaning forward. Because 3 years ago I decided I was done with people, with caring about people, with the inevitable pain of losing people. I built this place as a fortress against feeling too much, and you walked into my henhouse and dismantled every defense I had without even trying. That terrifies me because now I have something to lose again, and I do not know if I am strong enough to survive losing you. Violet crossed the space between them and knelt beside his chair, taking his large scarred hands in her smaller ones. Then do not lose me. Let me stay, truly stay, not as a hired hand or a charity case, but as someone who chooses to be here, as someone who is choosing you. Isaac looked down at her, this woman who had appeared in his life like answered prayer and made the bravest decision of his life. He cupped her face with one hand, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. When he kissed her, it was with the gentleness of a man who had spent years working with his hands and understood the difference between power and strength. Violet melted into him, her fingers curling into his shirt, and kissed him back with an intensity that spoke of her own loneliness finally finding its answer. They broke apart slowly, both breathless, foreheads resting together. "I am choosing you too," Isaac whispered against her lips. "God help me. I am choosing you, and whatever that means." What it meant, they discovered over the following weeks, was a complete renegotiation of everything they thought they knew about themselves. Isaac had to learn to let Violet take risks, to trust her competence even when his protective instincts screamed at him to wrap her in blankets and keep her safe. Violet had to learn to accept help, to recognize that Isaac's concern came from love, not a desire to control her. They danced around each other, courtship conducted in the simple moments of daily life. Isaac taught Violet to shoot, his hand steadying hers as she learned to aim his rifle. She proved a natural her focus and patience, translating into accuracy that surprised them both. Violet taught Isaac to cook more than just basic survival food, and they spent evenings experimenting with recipes from her mother's cookbook, laughing over failures and celebrating successes. December arrived with a blizzard that trapped them inside for 3 days. They passed the time reading aloud to each other, Isaac's deep voice bringing adventure stories to life while Violet's animated readings of poetry made him understand why people bothered writing such things. They played cards and chess, discovered they were evenly matched in stubbornness if not skill. They talked about their pasts, their dreams, the future they might build together. On the third night of the blizzard, with wind howling outside and the fire burning low, Isaac brought up the question that had been weighing on his mind. "Violet, what do you want from this? From us?" She looked up from the sock she was darning, her expression serious. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know what I want. I want you here permanently as my wife if you will have me. But I do not know if that is what you want. Maybe you want to see more of the world first, to visit that ocean you dreamed about. Maybe tying yourself to a mountain man and his chickens is not the future you imagined." Violet set down her darning and moved to sit beside him on the bearskin rug, close enough that their shoulders touched. "When I was a girl, I imagined a very different life, a proper marriage to a suitable man, a house in town, children, respectability, all the things my mother wanted for me. Then life happened, and those dreams seemed increasingly impossible. My father died poor, I lost our home, I was reduced to accepting charity from reluctant relatives. The future looked like a succession of other people's houses, other people's children, always being grateful for scraps." She turned to face him fully, taking his hand. "Then I walked into your henhouse and everything changed. For the first time in years I was not planning how to survive. I was just being myself, talking to chickens because they made sense when nothing else did. And you heard me, and instead of thinking I was crazy, you understood. You gave me space to breathe, to figure out who I was without all the expectations weighing me down." "So what does that mean?" Isaac pressed gently. "It means I have stopped dreaming about some theoretical future and started living in the present. It means when I think about tomorrow, I imagine waking up here, feeding Henrietta and Eleanor, working beside you, reading by this fire. It means I want to stay, Isaac, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because there is nowhere else I want to be. If that includes being your wife, then yes, absolutely yes, I want that too." Isaac exhaled slowly, relief and joy flooding through him. "I do not have much to offer this cabin, this land, a simple life far from civilization. No fancy dresses or social events or any of the things proper women are supposed to want." "I am not a proper woman," Violet said with a smile. "I am a woman who talks to chickens and wears men's trousers and thinks your mountain is the most beautiful place on earth. I am a woman who is choosing you, Isaac Thompson, exactly as you are." He kissed her then, deeper and more passionate than before, pouring weeks of longing and fear and hope into the touch of his lips against hers. When they finally broke apart, both flushed and breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "We should do this properly," he said. "Ride to town after the snow clears, find a preacher, make it legal and binding. I want everyone to know you are mine and I am yours." "Very well," Violet agreed, happiness bubbling in her voice. "But Isaac, I already know I am yours. I have known since the morning you found me and did not send me away. Since you listened to what I needed instead of deciding what I should want. Since you built me a door that locks from my side and trusted me to use it. I have been yours for weeks now. The preacher will just be making it official." The blizzard finally cleared, leaving the world transformed under feet of fresh snow. Isaac and Violet dug themselves out with determination, both eager to get to town and formalize their commitment. They made the journey to Bozeman on horseback, Violet riding behind Isaac on Bear's sturdy back, her arms wrapped around his waist as they navigated the snow-covered trails. The preacher they found was a Methodist circuit rider passing through town, a practical man who asked few questions and seemed genuinely pleased to marry two people so obviously in love. They spoke their vows in a small church with only the preacher's wife and a local shopkeeper as witnesses, Isaac's deep voice steady as he promised to love and cherish Violet for the rest of his days, Violet's violet eyes bright with tears as she pledged the same. Isaac had purchased a simple gold band at the trading post, and when he slid it onto Violet's finger, she stared at it as though he had given her the crown jewels. "It is perfect," she whispered. "Everything is perfect." They stayed one night in Bozeman's only hotel, a luxury they had not planned but Isaac insisted upon. "Want to do this right," he explained gruffly. "Want to give you at least one night that is special and different, not just collapsing into bed exhausted from chores." That night, in a room with actual wallpaper and a real feather bed, Isaac and Violet consummated their marriage with a tenderness that surprised them both. Isaac, for all his size and strength, was achingly gentle, constantly asking if she was comfortable, if he was hurting her, if she wanted him to stop. Violet, who had been nervous about this aspect of marriage, found herself relaxing into his touch, trusting him completely. What followed was awkward at times, both of them laughing at their inexperience, but also profound in its intimacy. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Violet's head on Isaac's broad chest, listening to his heartbeat and feeling more content than she had ever imagined possible. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I do not think I have said that clearly enough, but I love you, Isaac. I love your strength and your gentleness, and the way you speak to the chickens when you think I am not listening. I love your hands and your laugh and the way you look at the mountains like they are home. I love all of you." Isaac's arms tightened around her, his voice thick with emotion when he responded. "I love you too, Violet. Love you more than I thought possible. You took my lonely mountain and turned it into a home, took my careful solitude and showed me what I was missing. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful you wandered into my henhouse that morning." They returned to the cabin the next day as husband and wife, and life settled into a new rhythm that felt both familiar and transformed. The separate sleeping quarters became unnecessary, Violet moving her belongings into Isaac's room without discussion. They worked together through the winter, Isaac teaching Violet to snowshoe so she could accompany him on his trap lines, Violet teaching Isaac the finer points of bread making and discovering he had a talent for it. January brought brutal cold that kept them close to the cabin, venturing out only for necessary chores. They spent long evenings planning the spring garden, discussing whether to expand the chicken flock, debating the merits of acquiring a milk cow. These domestic conversations filled Isaac with quiet joy. He had never imagined discussing chicken breeds with such enthusiasm, but watching Violet's face light up as she argued for adding buff Orpingtons to their flock made him willing to consider just about anything. February brought a visitor, the first person other than Violet to approach the cabin in years. Isaac's younger brother, James Thompson, arrived on a fine gelding with saddlebags full of supplies and questions. He was smaller than Isaac, wiry where his brother was massive, with shorter hair and citified clothes that marked him as someone who had chosen a different path. "Thought I should check on you before another year passed," James said, dismounting stiffly. "Make sure you had not been eaten by bears or turned completely feral." Isaac embraced his brother, surprised by how glad he was to see him. "Still alive and considerably less feral than last time you considered visiting. Come inside, meet my wife." James's eyes widened comically. "You're what now, Isaac? Did you just say wife?" "I did," Isaac confirmed, unable to suppress a grin. "Married her in December. Come on, she has been cooking all morning, and there is enough food to feed half of Denver." Violet emerged from the cabin, wiping her hands on her apron, and James's shock deepened. She was beautiful in a simple way, her auburn hair pulled back, her face glowing with health and happiness, clearly very much in love with Isaac if her expression when she looked at him was any indication. "You must be James," Violet said warmly, extending her hand. "Isaac has told me so much about you. Please come inside where it is warm. You must be frozen from riding." Over dinner, James extracted the story of how they had met, shaking his head in wonder at the unlikely series of events that had brought Violet to Isaac's mountain. "So you just decided to keep her?" he asked his brother with amusement. "Like a stray kitten? More like she decided to keep herself," Isaac corrected, smiling at Violet across the table. "I just had enough sense not to argue." James stayed for 3 days, and watching Isaac with his brother gave Violet new insight into the man she had married. She saw the easy affection between them, the way they fell into childhood patterns of teasing and storytelling. She also saw the genuine concern James felt for Isaac's isolation, his relief at finding his brother happy and settled, rather than slowly going mad from solitude. On the evening before James left, he pulled Violet aside while Isaac was tending the animals. "I want you to know I was worried about him," James said quietly. After he left the army, after he came up here alone, I feared he was giving up on life rather than building a new one. But seeing him with you, seeing how he looks at you and how this place is transformed from a hermitage into a home, I know he is going to be all right. Thank you for that. I think we saved each other, Violet replied honestly. I was running from a life I could not bear, and he was hiding from a world that had hurt him. We found each other at exactly the right moment, and we are building something neither of us could have built alone. James rode out the next morning with promises to visit again in the summer, and Isaac and Violet stood together watching him disappear down the trail. That went well, Isaac observed, his arm around Violet's waist. He approves of you, I could tell. I liked him too, Violet said. It is good that you have family, Isaac. Good that you are not truly alone up here even when I arrived. Not alone now, Isaac corrected, pulling her close. Not ever alone again if I have any say in it. Spring arrived in a rush of melting snow and blooming wildflowers. Violet threw herself into the garden with enthusiasm, expanding it significantly and adding crops Isaac had never considered growing. She had a gift for coaxing life from the soil, and watching her work with dirt under her fingernails and satisfaction on her face filled Isaac with a contentment he had not known existed. In April, Violet began feeling unwell in the mornings, and after a week of this she looked at Isaac over breakfast with wonder and uncertainty in her eyes. I think I might be pregnant, she said quietly. I am not certain, but all the signs seem to point that direction. Isaac's face transformed, joy and fear warring for dominance. A baby? You are sure? Not completely, but fairly certain. How do you feel about that? Isaac came around the table and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. Terrified, he admitted, and happier than I have ever been. Violet, are you all right? Are you scared? A little, she confessed. My mother died when I was 17, so I do not have her wisdom to guide me, and we are so far from town, from doctors. But Isaac, I am also excited. The idea of a child, our child, running around this cabin and talking to the chickens like I do, that sounds wonderful. They spent the spring preparing for the baby's arrival. Isaac building a cradle from pine wood and Violet sewing tiny clothes from fabric they purchased on a trip to Bozeman. The local doctor confirmed Violet's pregnancy and predicted a late October birth, giving them time to prepare mentally and practically for the changes coming. Violet bloomed with pregnancy, her happiness evident in every aspect of her being. She continued her work around the homestead with Isaac watching nervously, ready to intervene if she showed any sign of overdoing it. They compromised on which tasks were safe and which should be his responsibility. Violet accepting that climbing on the cabin roof to check for leaks was probably not wise in her condition, Isaac accepting that she was perfectly capable of feeding chickens and tending the garden. Summer brought James back for a visit, this time with news that he was engaged to a woman in Denver and planning an autumn wedding. He was delighted about the baby, immediately offering to send baby supplies from the city and insisting they name him James if it was a boy. We will consider it, Isaac said diplomatically, sharing an amused glance with Violet. They had already privately agreed that a son would be named Charles, after Violet's uncle, and a daughter would be Emma, after Isaac's mother. The summer passed in a blur of work and preparation. They harvested the garden, put up vegetables for winter, and ensured the cabin was ready for a new occupant. Isaac expanded the chicken coop yet again, Violet having convinced him that more chickens meant more eggs, meant better trading opportunities in town. Eleanor and Henrietta supervised the construction with what Isaac swore was judgment in their beady chicken eyes. In September, with Violet growing notably rounder and slower, they made what they planned as their last trip to Bozeman before the baby arrived. They stocked up on supplies, checked in with the doctor, and were preparing to leave when they encountered Silas and one of his companions from the previous year. The men were clearly drunk, stumbling out of a saloon just as Isaac and Violet passed. Recognition flared in Silas's eyes, followed quickly by malice. Well, he slurred, if it is not the crazy girl and her mountain man. I see he managed to get you pregnant before you came to your senses and ran off. Isaac stepped in front of Violet, his body language making his intent clear. Walk away, he said quietly. Right now, while you still can. Or what? His challenged, his companion snickering. You will shoot us in the middle of town? I do not think so, mountain man. Besides, me and the boys have been thinking about paying you a visit, settling the score for how you humiliated us last year. You come near my property, Isaac said, his voice dropping to something cold and deadly, and you will not leave it alive. That is not a threat, that is a promise. Now get out of my sight before I decide waiting for you to come to me is not worth the trouble. Something in Isaac's eyes must have convinced Silas he was serious. The drunk man backed away, still muttering threats but clearly having lost his nerve for actual confrontation. Isaac waited until they disappeared back into the saloon before turning to Violet, who looked pale and shaken. "Are you all right?" he asked, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Did they hurt you?" "No, but Isaac, what if they really do come? With the baby coming, with winter approaching, we cannot afford trouble." "They will not come," Isaac said with certainty. "Men like that are cowards. They make threats when they are drunk and safe in town, but they will not follow through. And if they do, I will handle it. You and the baby will be safe, Violet. I promise you that." They rode home in tense silence, both lost in their own thoughts. That night, Isaac cleaned and loaded extra weapons, preparing for a threat he truly believed would not materialize but refusing to be caught unprepared. Violet watched him work, one hand on her swollen belly, and prayed he was right about Silas's cowardice. October arrived with crisp mornings and the aspens turning gold on the mountainsides. Violet was hugely pregnant now, moving slowly and tiring easily, but her spirits remained high. She spent hours talking to the chickens about the baby, and Isaac listened from the porch, his heart full. She had not changed at all from that first morning, still treating the birds like old friends, still finding peace in their uncomplicated company. On October 15th, Violet's labor began with the breaking of her water just after breakfast. Isaac, who had remained calm through blizzards and bear attacks and confrontations with dangerous men, promptly panicked. "Is it time? Should I ride for the doctor? How do you feel? Are you in pain?" "Isaac," Violet said, laughing despite the contraction tightening her belly. "Breathe. First babies take time. There is no need to panic yet. Just help me inside and then try to stay calm." What followed was the longest day of Isaac's life. Violet labored through the afternoon and into the evening, Isaac beside her the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, feeling utterly helpless in the face of her pain. When she screamed during the worst contractions, he wanted to break things, to fight something, to do anything that might make this easier for her. "I am sorry," he kept saying. "I am so sorry, Violet." "For what?" she gasped between contractions. "For giving me the family I always wanted? For loving me enough to bring new life into this world? Do not apologize. Isaac Thompson, this is hard, but it is good. It is so good." As midnight approached, their daughter finally arrived, a tiny, wrinkled thing with auburn fuzz on her head and lungs that announced her displeasure at being born. Isaac stared at her in wonder, this impossible creature he had helped create, and felt his entire world reorganize around her existence. "Emma," Violet whispered, exhausted but radiant as she held their daughter. "Our Emma." Isaac touched one finger to Emma's tiny hand, marveling when her miniature fingers curled around his scarred digit. "She is perfect," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You are perfect. Both of you are perfect." The next months passed in a blur of sleepless nights and steep learning curves. Emma proved to have a temperament as strong as both her parents, making her opinions known loudly and frequently. Isaac discovered reserves of patience he had not known he possessed, walking the floor with a crying baby at 3 in the morning, while Violet caught precious moments of sleep. Violet recovered from childbirth with determination, refusing to be kept down longer than necessary, much to Isaac's exasperation. "You need to rest," he insisted after finding her in the garden 2 weeks after giving birth. "Let me handle everything for a while longer." "I have been resting," Violet countered, bouncing Emma against her shoulder. "And I will go mad if I spend one more day trapped inside. The garden needs attention, the chickens miss me, and I need to feel useful again. Besides, Emma likes being outside. Look how content she is." It was true. Emma had stopped fussing the moment they stepped into the autumn sunshine, her gray eyes, which seemed to be settling into the same violet shade as her mother's, wide and curious as she took in the world. Winter arrived early that year, but the Thompson cabin was ready. They had food stored, wood stacked, and animals secured. The three of them settled into hibernation, the cabin warm and bright even as snow piled high outside. Isaac taught Violet to play chess during Emma's naps, and they had ongoing games that lasted weeks. Violet read aloud while nursing Emma, her voice bringing stories to life for both baby and husband. James visited in December to meet his niece, bringing supplies and news from Denver. His wedding had been a success, and his wife, Margaret, sent gifts for the baby, along with a letter expressing hope that they might visit in the summer. "She is desperate to see the famous mountain," James explained, "and to meet the woman who tamed my untamable brother." "I did not tame him," Violet protested. "I just convinced him that company could be pleasant." "Same thing," James said with a grin, accepting Emma into his arms and staring at her with typical uncle fascination. "She looks like you, Violet. Poor thing." "She looks like both of us," Isaac corrected, pride evident in his voice. "Best parts of both." Spring of 1878 brought new challenges and joys. Emma was crawling now, getting into everything with the single-minded determination she had inherited from both parents. Isaac baby-proofed the cabin as best he could, but Emma still managed to find danger in the most innocuous places. Violet spent half her time chasing after their daughter and half working the expanding homestead. They were beginning to talk about the future, about whether to expand their land claim, whether to acquire that milk cow they had discussed, whether one child was enough or if they wanted a larger family. In May, the threat they had almost forgotten materialized. Silas and 3 men rode onto Thompson property just after dawn, all armed, all clearly intent on trouble. Isaac, who had been checking his traps, saw them coming and ran back to the cabin, his heart pounding with fear for his family. "Violet, take Emma and get in the root cellar," he ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Do not come out until I tell you it is safe." "Isaac, what is happening?" Violet asked, clutching Emma close. "Those men from town, they came." He grabbed his rifle and pistol, checking ammunition. "I will handle this, but I need to know you and Emma are safe. Please, Violet, go now." Violet wanted to argue, to stand beside him, but one look at his face told her this was not the time. She kissed him fiercely, then fled to the root cellar with Emma, pulling the heavy door closed behind her. Isaac positioned himself on the porch, rifle ready, as the 4 riders approached. They stopped 20 yards away, just outside easy rifle range, and Silas called out, "We have come for what you owe us, Mountain Man. You humiliated us, cost us work because people thought we were weak. Now we will take that from you. Your woman, your property, whatever we decide is fair compensation." "You will leave this property immediately," Isaac replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "This is your only warning." 4 against 1, Silas said. "Those are not good odds for you." "They were not good last time either," Isaac reminded him. "Yet you left without what you came for. What makes you think today will be different?" The answer came in the form of gunfire. One of Silas's companions fired first, and Isaac dove behind the porch railing as bullets thudded into wood. He returned fire with precision born of years as a military scout, his first shot sending one attacker tumbling from his saddle. The remaining 3 scattered, seeking cover and firing wildly. The gunfight lasted perhaps 10 minutes, though it felt like hours to Isaac. He used every advantage his familiarity with the property provided, moving between positions, taking careful shots, conserving ammunition. Another attacker went down, wounded but not dead. The third lost his nerve and fled, spurring his horse back down the mountain at a dangerous pace. That left Silas, and Isaac could see the man's rage and desperation warring with his instinct for self-preservation. "This is not over," Silas shouted, firing another wild shot that went nowhere near Isaac. "You hear me? This is not over." "Yes, it is," Isaac said, and fired one final shot that kicked up dirt at Silas's horse's feet, sending the animal into a panicked rear. Silas fought for control, realized he had lost, and finally rode away, leaving his wounded companion groaning in the dirt. Isaac approached the wounded man cautiously, rifle ready, but the man was in no condition to fight. The bullet had caught him in the shoulder, painful but not life-threatening if treated properly. Isaac bound the wound roughly, then hauled the man onto his horse with instructions. "You ride back to Bozeman. You tell everyone who will listen that Isaac Thompson defended his property against claim jumpers, and anyone else who comes here with violence will meet the same fate. You tell them I want to be left alone in peace with my family, but I will not hesitate to protect what is mine, understand?" The wounded man nodded, pale and shaking, and rode away with considerably more haste than skill. Isaac waited until he was sure all the attackers were truly gone, then called out, "Violet, it is safe." She emerged from the root cellar moments later, Emma crying against her shoulder, Violet's own face tear-stained. "Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" "I am fine," Isaac assured her, opening his arms. She crashed into him and they held each other tightly. Emma squashed between them, all 3 of them shaking with relief. "It is over, Violet. They will not be back. Not ever." That afternoon they buried the man who had died, Isaac feeling no joy in taking a life but no regret either for defending his family. Word spread quickly through the territory about the gunfight on Thompson Mountain, and the story grew with each telling. Some versions had Isaac facing down a dozen men. Others claimed he had been wounded multiple times but fought on regardless. The truth was less dramatic but effective. Isaac Thompson was not to be trifled with, and his family was under his protection. Life gradually returned to normal, though Isaac found himself more cautious, more watchful. Violet understood his increased vigilance and did not protest when he insisted on certain security measures. They were careful about who they told when they would be away from the property. Isaac taught Violet to shoot with even greater skill, ensuring she could defend herself and Emma if necessary. Summer brought James and his new wife, Margaret, for a visit. Margaret was a practical woman who took to Violet immediately, and the two women formed a fast friendship based on mutual respect and shared experiences of loving stubborn Thompson men. They spent a week exploring the mountains, picnicking by streams, and introducing Emma to her aunt. Margaret was enchanted by the baby and by the life Isaac and Violet had built. "I thought James was exaggerating when he described this place," Margaret admitted to Violet while the men were fishing. "I imagined something rough and primitive, but you have created something beautiful here, a real home filled with love and purpose. I envy you that." "We worked hard for it," Violet replied, watching Emma toddle after a butterfly with Isaac shadowing her every step. "But yes, it is beautiful. I wake up every morning grateful for this life, for this place, for that impossible man who heard me talking to his chickens and decided I belonged." "Do you ever miss civilization?" Margaret asked. "Shops, society, cultural events?" Violet considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss variety, the option to see new things or meet new people. But then I remember what I left behind, the constant judgment and gossip and pressure to conform. Here I can be exactly who I am. I can talk to chickens, wear men's trousers, speak my mind, make decisions that affect my own life. I would not trade that freedom for all the cultural events in the world." Autumn of 1878 arrived with another early winter. They had expanded the homestead further, adding the long-discussed milk cow, a gentle Guernsey named Buttercup who Emma adored. The chicken flock now numbered 25, and Isaac had built an additional coop to house them all. The garden had been their most productive yet, and they had enough preserved food to see them through to spring with plenty to spare. On a clear October evening, exactly 1 year after Emma's birth, Isaac and Violet sat on the porch while their daughter slept inside. The mountains were painted gold and purple by the setting sun, and the air smelled of pine and approaching winter. "Do you remember this day last year?" Violet asked, leaning against Isaac's solid warmth. "How terrified we both were." "I remember thinking I could not possibly love you more than I did at that moment," Isaac replied. "And I remember being wrong, because I love you more today than I did then, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Seems to keep growing." "I know what you mean," Violet said softly. "Sometimes I look at you with Emma, watching how gentle you are with her despite your size and strength, and my heart feels too full for my chest. Or I wake up in the morning and realize I am exactly where I belong, doing exactly what I am meant to do. And the gratitude overwhelms me." "Think we should have another?" Isaac asked, voicing the question that had been on both their minds. "Give Emma a sibling?" "Yes," Violet said without hesitation. "Not right away, perhaps. Let us get through another winter. Let Emma grow a bit more. But yes, I want a larger family. I want this cabin filled with children who grow up knowing they are loved and safe and free to be themselves." "Then that is what we will do," Isaac agreed. "Fill this mountain with little Thompsons who talk to chickens and ask impossible questions and make us wonder what we have gotten ourselves into." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Inside, Emma stirred and cried out, and Violet rose to tend to her. Isaac followed, as he always did, unable to resist checking on his daughter even though he knew Violet had everything under control. Emma settled quickly, clutching her favorite blanket and the small carved wooden chicken Isaac had made for her first birthday. Violet smoothed her daughter's auburn curls, humming softly, and Isaac stood in the doorway watching them with emotions too large for words. This was what mattered, not the size of their homestead or the number of chickens, or whether they ever saw the ocean Violet had once dreamed about. This moment, this family, this love they had built from nothing but determination and hope, and the willingness to trust in something uncertain. The years continued to pass, each bringing new challenges and triumphs. In 1879 they welcomed their second child, a son they named Charles as planned, who proved to have his father's size and his mother's temperament. In 1881 another daughter arrived, and they named her Rose after much debate, neither wanting to presume too much on either family's history. Emma grew into a fierce, independent child who did indeed talk to the chickens exactly as her mother did. She announced at age 5 that she would be a rancher when she grew up, and Isaac believed her. Charles was quieter, more contemplative, content to sit and watch the world while his sisters charged through it. Rose, the baby, was still defining herself, but showed signs of being the most stubborn Thompson yet, which was saying something. The homestead prospered. Isaac's careful management and Violet's agricultural gifts combined to create something impressive. They were known throughout the territory as hardworking, honest, and not to be troubled without cause. Other homesteaders sought Isaac's advice on building and hunting. Women traveled considerable distances to learn gardening techniques from Violet. The Thompson cabin became a rare hub of civilization in the wilderness, welcoming to those who came in peace, dangerous to those who did not. James visited every summer, sometimes bringing Margaret and eventually their own children. The cousins played together in the mountains, forming bonds that would last lifetimes. James had done well in Denver, but he freely admitted to Isaac that he envied what his brother had built. "You found something real," James said during a visit in 1883. "I have success, money, social standing, all the things we are supposed to want, but you have purpose. Every morning you wake up knowing exactly why you are here and what matters. That is worth more than anything I have accomplished." "You could have this too," Isaac pointed out. "Montana Territory still has plenty of land available." "No," James said with a smile. "This is your dream, not mine. I am a city man at heart, but I am glad one of us found exactly what we needed." In 1885, Violet made a surprising announcement. "I want to travel," she said one evening after the children were in bed. "Not permanently, not to move away. But Isaac, I want to show the children the ocean I used to dream about. I want them to see more than just these mountains, as much as we love them. I want them to know the world is vast and full of possibilities." Isaac's first instinct was to refuse, to cite the dangers and difficulties and expense. But then he remembered the young woman who had sat in his henhouse talking about freedom and possibility. And he realized that the best gift he could give his wife was to honor those dreams, even when they scared him. "All right," he said. "We will plan a trip. Maybe next summer, when the children are a bit older, we will go to California, see that Pacific Ocean you always wondered about. As a family." Violet's face lit with joy so pure it made Isaac's heart ache. "Really? You mean it?" "I mean it," he confirmed. "Though I reserve the right to complain about leaving the homestead for that long, and you have to promise we will come back." "Of course we will come back," Violet said, kissing him soundly. "This is home, Isaac. This will always be home. But I want to show our children that the world is bigger than they imagine. And then I want to bring them back here and let them choose this place consciously, the way we did." They spent the winter of 1885 planning their expedition. Isaac arranged for a trusted neighbor to look after the animals and property. Violet sewed traveling clothes for all 5 of them. The children were beside themselves with excitement, asking endless questions about trains and oceans and cities. In June of 1886, the Thompson family departed on the adventure of a lifetime. They took the train from Bozeman to San Francisco, a journey that took days and left all of them exhausted and amazed in equal measure. Emma, now 8, kept her nose pressed to the window the entire time, absorbing everything. Charles, 6, was fascinated by the mechanics of the train itself. Rose, 4, mostly wanted to know when they could go home to the chickens. San Francisco was overwhelming. A assault on senses accustomed to mountain quiet. But the ocean, when they finally saw it, was everything Violet had imagined and more. She stood on the beach with tears streaming down her face, watching waves roll in with the endless rhythm Isaac had promised years ago. "It is beautiful," she whispered, holding Isaac's hand while their children played in the surf. "It is so beautiful, Isaac. Thank you for bringing me here." "Thank you for reminding me that dreams matter," Isaac replied. "That life is not just about survival but about living fully, experiencing everything we can." They spent 2 weeks in California showing the children museums and parks and all the wonders of civilization. Then, as planned, they returned to Montana, to their mountain, to their chickens and their cabin and the life they had built. Emma summed up all their feelings when she ran from the wagon and threw herself at Henrietta, the old hen now gray around her beak but still ruling the flock. "I missed you so much," Emma announced. "I saw the ocean like Mama always wanted and it was beautiful, but I like our mountain better. I like home." "Me too," Violet said, breathing in the familiar scent of pine and mountain air. "I like home best." The years continued their steady march. Emma did indeed become a rancher, taking over more of the homestead operation as she grew older, and eventually marrying a neighbor's son who shared her passion for the land. Charles surprised everyone by developing an interest in teaching, eventually establishing a small school for the scattered homesteading families in the area. Rose proved to have Violet's gift for growing things, cultivating what became famous as the best garden in 3 counties. Isaac and Violet aged together, their bodies wearing down from hard work but their spirits remaining strong. Isaac's hair went fully gray, though he kept it long in defiance of changing fashions. Violet developed laugh lines around her eyes and never regretted a single one. They were grandparents by 1895, Emma having provided them with twin grandsons who terrorized the chickens with the same enthusiasm their mother had shown. In 1897, on their 20th wedding anniversary, Isaac and Violet sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Their children were grown and scattered but close. Their grandchildren were healthy and thriving, and the homestead they had built together stood as testimony to what could be achieved with love, determination, and the willingness to trust in the impossible. "Do you remember the morning you found me in the henhouse?" Violet asked, her head resting on Isaac's shoulder despite both of them complaining of creaky joints these days. "What you were thinking when you heard me talking to Henrietta?" Isaac laughed, the sound still deep and warm despite the years. "I remember thinking you were either crazy or perfect, and I was not sure which. Then I decided you were probably both and that I wanted to find out." "I was both," Violet agreed. "Still am, probably. Crazy enough to run away into the wilderness, perfect enough to find exactly what I needed at the end of that run." "I knew you belonged," Isaac said softly, voicing something he had never quite put into words before. "From that very first moment, hearing you confide in a chicken like she was your dearest friend, treating her with respect and genuine affection, I knew you belonged here, knew you belonged with me, even though I had no right to think that. Something just clicked into place, and I knew my life had just changed completely." "Mine too," Violet whispered. "I had been running for so long, from grief and fear and disappointment, and then I stopped running, sat down with some chickens, and found out I had been running toward something all along. Toward you, toward this life, toward everything I needed without knowing I needed it." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared behind the mountains and stars began their nightly appearance. Inside the cabin they could hear Emma trying to settle the twins for the night, the chaos of family filling the space that had once been Isaac's lonely retreat. "No regrets?" Isaac asked, a question they posed to each other periodically, always certain of the answer but needing to hear it confirmed. "Not a single one," Violet replied firmly. "You? Only that I wasted 3 years living here alone before you showed up," Isaac said. "Think of all the conversations I could have had with you instead of just talking to the chickens by myself." "The chickens appreciated your attention," Violet teased. "And besides, maybe you needed those 3 years alone to be ready for me. Maybe I needed my years of struggle to be ready for you. Maybe everything happened exactly when it was supposed to." "Maybe," Isaac agreed. "Or maybe we just got lucky. Maybe we got blessed," Violet suggested. "By whatever power arranges these things, by fate or chance or divine intervention. Something brought me to your henhouse that morning, and something made you kind instead of suspicious. I choose to call that a blessing." Isaac pulled her closer, marveling as he always did that this incredible woman had chosen to spend her life with him. "Then I am the most blessed man in Montana territory," he declared. "Possibly the most blessed man anywhere." As the years advanced into a new century, Isaac and Violet continued their partnership with the same devotion they had shown from the beginning. Age slowed them both, but it could not diminish the love that had sustained them through 2 decades of marriage, and showed no signs of fading. They celebrated their 25th anniversary in 1902, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends they had accumulated over the years, the cabin bursting with laughter and love. Emma had taken over most of the homestead operations by then, running the expanded ranch with her husband, while her parents transitioned into advisory roles. Charles's school had grown into a proper institution, attracting families to the area specifically for the educational opportunities he provided. Rose had married and moved to a neighboring valley but visited frequently, always bringing vegetables from her legendary garden and news of her own growing family. Isaac and Violet spent their days in a gentle rhythm that honored their age while maintaining their independence. They still tended the chickens together every morning, though the flock was now managed primarily by Emma's children. They still sat on the porch every evening, watching the mountains that had witnessed their entire life together. They still talked for hours about everything and nothing, finding new layers in a relationship they had spent decades building. "I want to be buried up here," Violet said one evening in 1904, the statement coming from nowhere but feeling important. "When my time comes, I want to rest on this mountain, not in some town cemetery far from home." "I already planned on that," Isaac replied, unsurprised by the topic. They had reached an age where death was no longer abstract but a reality requiring practical preparation. "There is a spot up on the ridge, near where we used to picnic when the children were young. Beautiful view of the valley, peaceful, permanent. I figured we would rest there together when the time comes." "Together," Violet agreed, "as we have done everything else." Isaac's health began to fail in 1905, his body finally wearing out from a lifetime of hard physical labor. He fought it stubbornly, refusing to be confined to bed when there was work to be done. Violet fought alongside him, insisting he rest when necessary, providing support without stripping him of dignity. The children rallied, taking over more responsibilities, ensuring their parents were cared for without being made to feel useless. On a clear October morning in 1906, exactly 29 years after Emma's birth, Isaac died peacefully in the bed he had shared with Violet for nearly 3 decades. She was holding his hand, their children gathered around, when he took his last breath with her name on his lips. The family buried him on the ridge he had chosen, marking the spot with a simple stone that read Isaac Thompson, 1845-1906. He built a home and filled it with love. The entire territory seemed to turn out for the funeral, testimony to the life Isaac had lived and the respect he had earned. Violet mourned deeply but did not break. She was 80 now, her own health failing, but she had promises to keep and family to love. She spent her remaining days teaching her grandchildren everything she knew about gardening and animals and living with integrity. She told them stories about their grandfather, ensuring his memory would live on in their hearts. She sat with the chickens, talking to them as she always had, finding comfort in their uncomplicated presence. On a spring morning in 1907, Violet died in her sleep, her passing as peaceful as Isaac's had been. The family found her with a smile on her face and a letter on her bedside table, written in her careful hand and addressed to all of them. The letter spoke of love and gratitude, of a life well lived despite its hardships. It spoke of a morning in 1877 when a desperate woman sat in a henhouse talking to chickens, and a lonely man heard her and knew she belonged. It spoke of 28 years of marriage that had exceeded every dream and expectation. It spoke of children and grandchildren who were her greatest achievement, and it ended with simple words that captured everything. I was lost and I found home. I was alone and I found love. I was running away, and I discovered I had been running toward everything I needed all along. Do not mourn me. Celebrate instead that I lived fully, loved completely, and leave behind a family that will carry forward everything your father and I built together. Talk to the chickens sometimes. You will be surprised how much they understand. Love each other. Take care of this mountain. And remember that belonging is not about place, but about finding people who see you completely and love you anyway. I belonged the moment your father looked at me and decided I was worth keeping. May you all find that kind of belonging in your own lives. They buried Violet beside Isaac on the ridge, her stone reading Violet Harper Thompson, 1853-1907. She turned a lonely mountain into a loving home. The family gathered around both graves, 3 generations united in grief and gratitude for the legacy their matriarch and patriarch had left behind. Emma, now approaching 40, stood with her own children and grandchildren, and felt the weight of responsibilities settle on her shoulders. This mountain, this homestead, this family, all of it was now in her keeping. She would honor her parents' memory by continuing what they had started, by ensuring their great-grandchildren grew up knowing the stories, understanding the values, appreciating the sacrifice and love that had built their legacy. The chickens, descendants of Henrietta and Eleanor and the original flock, continued their morning chatter in the coop Isaac had built and expanded over the years. The garden, planted with techniques Violet had perfected through decades of practice, bloomed with vegetables that fed the extended family. The cabin, expanded and improved but still fundamentally the same structure Isaac had built with his own hands, stood solid and welcoming on the mountain that had witnessed such an extraordinary love story. And sometimes, on quiet mornings when the mist hung low in the valleys and the mountains glowed with sunrise, Emma swore she could hear her mother's voice talking to the chickens, explaining the complexities of life to birds who listened with sympathetic clucks. She would smile, remembering, and add her own voice to the conversation, maintaining a tradition that had started with a desperate woman seeking shelter and a lonely man wise enough to recognize that she belonged. The Thompson family thrived for generations on that Montana mountain, each new child learning the story of how it all began. How a woman running for her life stopped to talk to some chickens. How a mountain man heard her and made the bravest decision of his life by asking her to stay. How 2 lost souls found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something that lasted far beyond their own lives. It became family legend, the story told and retold at gatherings and celebrations, embellished slightly with each telling but never losing its essential truth. Isaac and Violet Thompson had found each other when both needed finding. They had built a home from nothing but determination and love. They had created a family that understood the value of hard work, honest living, and treating animals with the same respect you would show any friend. And they had loved each other with a devotion that transcended circumstance, age, and eventually death itself. The chickens kept their vigil in the henhouse, generation after generation, unknowing witnesses to the miracle they had helped create. And the mountain kept its secrets, holding close the memory of a love story that had begun with such an unlikely moment, but had grown into something eternal. Something that would echo through the years long after everyone who had known Isaac and Violet personally had passed into memory themselves. It was a story of belonging, of finding home in the most unexpected places, of love that transforms ordinary moments into extraordinary legacy. It was the story of mountain man Isaac Thompson, who found Violet Harper talking to his chickens like they were old friends and knew, with certainty that defied logic, that she belonged on his mountain, in his life, forever in his heart. And it was a story with the happiest of endings, because true belonging, once found, never really ends. It simply continues, growing and expanding, touching new lives and creating new stories while honoring the original moment when everything changed. When a woman sat down with some chickens and a man was wise enough to listen, and two lonely souls discovered they had never really been alone at all. They had simply been waiting, preparing, becoming the people who would recognize each other when the moment finally arrived. That was the legacy Isaac and Violet Thompson left behind. Not just land or property or material wealth, but the understanding that home is not a place but a feeling of belonging, and love is not a destination but a journey taken together, one day at a time. From the moment you recognize your own heart in another person's eyes, until the very last breath and beyond, into memory and legacy, and the eternal echo of two lives perfectly joined.